Oh, okay, we're live. Okay.
Live.
I'm like frantically trying to get my stream set up working.
It's my audio is the problem, as always, right? Where I don't know what it is. Like we had it the other day with Swifty. Like I literally had it yesterday, where I only have one audio input, right? And Discord would have two options, right? It would have default and then my blue snowball, and then in the middle of me actively speaking, it would switch which option would be the actual microphone to do it. Like, I have no idea what the issue is. And yes, it will do it in-game. It will do it all the time. Yeah. So let's get started.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, into it we go. Well, I was trying to talk to the empty void about how what we did in week 3. So, hi everyone. I'm excited to be back. It's been a little while, but we are talking today about super exciting stuff. And sorry, Leper, I'm taking over this introduction now, and I'm butchering it while I'm at it. We are talking about super exciting week, our week 3 irrational predictions, and what does it look like today? Back in week 3 of the regular season, we Leper, Decker, and myself went through and looked at all the teams, and we said, here at the end of the season, before the playoffs, but at the end of the regular season, this is what we think the teams are going to look like. The rankings are going to look like, rather, not the teams. The rosters are unpredictable. You guys have proven that to us time and again. Dear God. It makes it impossible to keep track of things sometimes. But, no, so, point being, we're looking at what we thought things would be like at the end of the regular season going into playoffs, and so far, there is no element of correctness, just varying levels of incorrectness. Swifty, you have the blessing of hindsight. You get to come in and be like, that's a terrible idea. Why would you ever think that was going to work? And make fun of Leper and myself.
Guesses, right?
100% accuracy, sir.
Also 0% at the same time.
So this was also the first time that we did community input, right? We basically put out a survey, we got the things, and y'all are also very, very wrong, right? Very wrong.
Yeah, as much as ZGG General Chat loves to pretend they're the best analysts out there.
What I will say is Decker, who is not here, he's got a family thing going on, did some sort of point calculation where he basically took points away and added points the closer you were, right? And the community and myself were tied for being the least incorrect. And Tex was the most incorrect. And
Let's
Decker
go!
Was in there.
2 seasons running, baby!
I want to say, just given Decker's point values, it was Leper and the community were at -14, Decker was at -16, and Tex was at -18. However,
Let's go.
However, I will also say that if we go by who actually got the most correct, I need to look at the community, but of the 3 of us, given that there was eating potently hot sauce covered wings on the line for this, I did get the least correct. So I will be doing one of my playoff debates using the last dab.
I will do it with you.
I'm so excited
I do it
for
with
this.
you because I didn't make predictions.
Yes.
If you want to,
you are
yeah.
also the same sauce.
So
Leper and I are both hot sauce.
That will happen next week for one of those.
Should we have Swifty and Leper go head-to-head on a debate episode with the last stab, each having the last
I
stab?
am so down. I'll toss a full wing, and I'll go full wing if you want to do it.
That's fine with me. That is fine with me. I mean, I've kept my bottle
Okay.
sealed since I've gotten it specifically for this.
All right.
Absolute monsters.
So, with that, we can get off the title screen. So this was Division 1. Division 1. Let's look and see how many did the community get correct.
Alright, so from the top down...
They got 1 correct, which was Revolution Uprising. Everything
for
else...
Division A.
Division A. Everything else potentially is incorrect. The Hyperion Shadow may end up being correct. But that's it.
Well, to be fair, the relative ranges are pretty close, right? You've got Big Duck Entourage in the top, you got Revolution in the top, The third, like GSG Delta, you know, I'm there with you guys. Community, I'm there with you. I'm here for the hype train. It just didn't click as hard, but it's good to see that this team is stepping up, you know, to from where they started, which was a winless season, to having a season where they're competitive, you know, 2-3, yes, but they're in there, right? They're in that top 5 spot, top 4 spot. But yeah, no, the community was definitely not right. But they were also the least.
They were
the least incorrect.
They were the least incorrect. Right. They had they were more in the ballpark than you.
Yes.
I don't have much to say about that beyond GSG Delta. Where are we at, guys? Season 3, isn't Season 3 the redemption arc for the anime protagonist? Right? What's going on? Swifty, you understand these things, right? When does the shonen protagonist like see his glory in the show? Like, when does it click?
Okay, here I'm gonna let you know a secret. I don't know anything about anime.
I don't know why I thought you did.
Who's the guy with anime in his background or something else? Like, I have a Lord of the Rings tattoo, and I have like a Darth Vader Lego helmet next to my head. Like, if that gives you more of my speed.
Okay. All right.
But what was your question? I'm sorry.
Well, I think you've answered it. No, the question is, so I don't know if you know the history of GSG Delta. They're a team that came in fresh to league. If I remember correctly, it's a group of fellas that were playing Rainbow Six competitively together.
Yes.
And they jumped.
That's pretty awesome.
Decker roped them, and what I understand, they were pretty decent at that. Decker roped him into playing League of Legends because he is a terrible friend. He got him involved, and he had them start to play this game together. And they started out with a winless season in their very first season last summer. And the last season they had a pretty solid start that ended with a bit of a rough tail to it. But they kept the team together. They had a lot of roster swaps last season.
One game.
Yes, they won one game, which was an infinite improvement over the first season.
I didn't know this. I'm surprised I just hadn't found this out offhandedly. So they had been introduced to League by the one and only Decker, and then upon entering League, immediately began playing competitive League.
So being part of GSG, the original Goon Squad Gaming, in IBS got together not just to play League, but like for the express purpose of playing something else competitive that wasn't Rainbow Six.
Okay. And they quickly jumped into League, though, is right?
Yes.
Now, the fact that, and this was what, last year you said?
This was last summer split. So
the fact that they have 2 wins.
Yeah.
After.
So they went 0.
That is honestly amazing.
0, 1, and now 2 wins in their third season. Now this particular split was the different team, but like we can keep the storyline going.
Keeping the storyline going. I mean,
well, this team still has Axel and Salamander Speak, right?
Axel, Salamander Speak, Rendog, Day Drinker, and Lenny.
I mean, League is a steep. In my opinion, it is one of the steepest learning curves of all video games, especially esport-oriented video games. Right? If you look at a lot of like rank distributions of other games, this is kind of off topic, but like I kind of want to say something about it. Like there's more like people in Diamond and stuff than there are in League. You know what I mean? Like, and League is difficult, and competitive League is arguably more difficult for a very different reason. And the fact that this team is now looking at finishing 4th?
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that if I picked up League a year ago and you kicked me right into competitive League, so that's actually a pretty cool storyline.
And on the flip side of that, you're talking about, like, time spent in a game, especially in a competitive sense, is really important because you can't get over these curves, right, without time. You can try to consume all of the Foxdrop LOL videos or whatever is actually popular now.
Skill capped or whatever.
I'm dating myself, okay? I'm dating myself here. But you can consume all this content and drill all you want, but the thing that's always going to be a limiter is how much time you have to put into the game and how much time you give yourself to grow. And so on the flip side of that conversation, right, we have Delta, which are still a young team, right? They're still new to competition, new to League of Legends relative to a certain subset of the competitive pool here in teams like Revolution Uprising and Big Duck Entourage, which are filled with on top and also on the other side we'll get to it with FTD1 and FTD clowns or GSG Kappa. That was supposed to be funny. Please laugh. Thank you.
So
Okay.
Pint is done.
Pint is done. You got through it. Anyways, point being, these teams like Big Duck Entourage, like Revolution Uprising, are teams with players who have been playing together. Well, they've been playing the game for a long time, right? You've got folks like Danobi and Tim and Wiz and Swag Moneyboy and Sightstone and these guys who have either been playing together for a long time and or playing the game for a long time, and it's showing up. These are teams that are really stepping into the fold and hitting their stride. You know, it's a kind of stars aligned, right? You've got experience, you've got talent, you got the right pieces fitting together, and they're hitting the stride, and they're it's showing. So like maybe GSG Delta in the next split or the split after, right? They're climbing. It's a continuous upward trajectory, which is awesome, and I'm really excited to see where they end up. But before we get too crazy into my ramblings, I want to pull myself back here, and Leper, I want to hear what your thoughts are about some of the disparities between where we ended up and what the analyst desk here had to say.
I think some of the sameness, right? It makes sense, right? Like, unfortunately, TFF Solar Flare is a solid team. They ended up showing up third. They just kind of flew under the radar all season. You know what I mean? Solidly in that middle of the pack in Division A. And we had been overall, I think that from our logic at the time, right, and the community's logic, that more of the reason that the TFF Solar Flare 4th place is incorrect is due to Goon Squad Gaming Delta underperforming compared to what we felt they were going to be than
Absolutely.
The other way around. Again,
Absolutely.
not to, like, TFF Solar Flare and their players have been like the butt of a lot of statements that I've said recently, and they're undeserved. They're a solid team. They're not a flashy team. They're not... Yeah, they're a great middle-of-the-pack team. The Hyperion Shadow 4th place was optimistic, to put it mildly.
Optimistic. Well, you know, at times, I think...
When you have we'll talk about it again when we hit the other side, right? When you... Hyperion Shadow... when you have a team that plays 7 different weeks with 7 different rosters,
yeah,
it's hard to expect a lot.
Well, to throw it back to our boy Colonel, right? When he was talking about, I remember week 3 of last split in the spring and winter, Colonel was saying like about VBU at the time, and they were making these crazy roster changes, not crazy, but like these big sweeping roster changes in week 2 after 1 or 2 losses, right? That, fair enough, weren't great, but he was saying, guys, keep the rosters together at least a little longer. Don't make these massive changes. Try to find the little pieces that you can shift, whether it's an attitude, a mentality, an approach to the game with an existing player. Form those dynamics and give yourself the thing that we're talking about, that ever limited but ever necessary resource of time. And one of the things that a lot of teams do.
Up on that, right? Like, I'm playing with a new team recently in Runeterra Academy, and we are just losing left and right. And it's not even that we don't get along. It's not even that we don't know what we're doing. We're all veterans. We know what we're doing, and it's still just a matter of learning to play with each other is more important than, like, taking out somebody that's underperforming or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. Swifty.
I just to tag on to that point, I think a lot of times the gut sort of, like, you know, knee-jerk reaction to, oh crap, we're losing a ton of games, what do we do, is who's the worst on our team? And I think it's an understandable sort of, like, human reaction, right? Like, oh, cut out what we think might be hurting us. And I think it's more often than not the wrong decision, right? Rather than, especially when you're playing, like, in a silver or in a gold league, where you're not dealing with, like, just the absolute peak performance, right? You're dealing with players who are still learning to fine-tune their own aspects of the game, right? And I think more often than not, yes, allowing a team to have time and stick together rather than roster change after roster change. You see it in gold, you see it in IBS. Those frequent and sporadic roster changes tend to not lead to success. And tend to do more damage, in my opinion, than actually allowing a team to grow and, hell, maybe have a bad season. Like, they happen, you know? Like, I've had them. I've looked like the worst jungler in seasons before. It's happen.
It's not fun. And I've seen it happen, though, with what roster swaps, where you roster swap early, week 1, 2, maybe 3, and you do a big sweeping change of people that don't get along or something like that, and then you keep it together the rest of the time. Like, I've seen that work, you know what I mean? But I haven't really seen the constant shifting ever work.
Yeah,
I will say...
play...
Oh, go on.
Sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say, don't play this. Don't be the manager of a team the way I manage my NFL fantasy teams. I'm tinkering. I'm swapping shit in and out. Yeah, I'm on the waiver wire, but don't do that here. That's bad.
Yeah, these are real people that like you're pulling out of games. This isn't fantasy.
So I will say that overall, we were all kind of generally in the right ballpark in this division.
50, is there anything that stands out to you here that's like...
I was about to say no. Nothing really stands out to me. Because to me, it seems like you all are on the same page with this. Relatively speaking, Hyperion, I guess even if you count Shogun, Hyperion, Spartans, and Shogun all sit towards the bottom. Then you have like GSG Delta and TFF Solar Flare like hovering somewhere between like 3 and 5 for most people, it looks like, and then you have your top 2 or 3 for the most part.
Absolutely.
It's all like the same, essentially.
To give credit to the community, the polls were put out. Basically, Shogun Esports dropped right as like the night before we started doing this, so all the results came in with Shogun Esports assumed to be part of the rest of the season for the community vote. But with that, I do want to push us along to Division 2 and get some thoughts on that one a little bit here.
We're a lot more all over the place here in Division 2. We don't have the same level of consistency that we do yeah.
Man, I put a lot of credit on same strategy, clearly.
It looks like you guys put more credit on Roar.
They looked really good at the time. Really good. And
even the community was like Roar.
Yeah.
Yeah. They came out swinging early on, and they had a kind of an unknown roster, and it was hard to place them, right? They had I think this is another team, and Leper, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, I've been traveling a bunch and have been away from the scene for a minute, but they had a lot of roster swaps in bulk throughout multiple parts of the season that I think led to them being a little more unstable, like what we saw with some of the other teams in Division 1.
It's unfortunate that the downfall of this team started when they submitted a player that we ended up denying.
Like off the bat?
Well, there was a lot of debate about it, right? And it seems that the team kind of, with the friends and so on that happened from there, that this team just kind of stopped caring. Does that make sense? Like that's my impression, having the behind the scenes a bit. They also, it's an unfortunate byproduct of the way that the RAR teams are done, right? Where whoever kind of shows up that week, we're going to keep a shuffle of 15 people that we're going to swap in and out, you know what I mean? We don't know exactly who's going to play. We don't necessarily have a consistent shot caller. At the time, they were playing really, really well. I think Penny 743 in the top lane was somebody that a lot of people were really looking at as somebody that was really, really strong. And then it kind of faltered, and they started losing to just about everybody.
I do want to talk a little bit about Hivemind Gaming. We had them all, generally speaking, pretty low, if not at the bottom. And they came out like swinging, or at least at the end of the season, they kind of cemented themselves as a competitor
over the entire season. They did one thing. They did a thing. They swapped Momentai from top lane to jungle, and they swapped Grizzly from jungle to top lane. Is what they did. And
both of those guys are doing a lot better in those new roles, when I look at those stats.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of, I believe it was Hivemind, right, versus Leper, your team, right? Versus Kappa? I had the pleasure of casting that game.
They did not have Momentai though. They had a sub jungler in when you casted that game.
Timic, was it?
No,
or Timic on your team?
Lendl was playing, not Momentai.
Got it. Thank you. Now, obviously, I wasn't following very early on in the season, so if you're talking about this team being a sort of like scaling team, I think is a relatively popular colloquialism or term that people like to use when a team gets better over the course of a season. If this is indeed a scaling team, I'm sure that they probably didn't look as good right in the beginning, but from what I saw casting that game, well, in my opinion, it was clear that Kappa was the better team. Hivemind did not appear to be a team that was completely lost. They were very close, and like just a few sort of cohesive elements and like instances of unity away from pulling off some really good things. They looked like a team with like fine players. They looked like a team that like had potential and had stuff in the pot, but they just didn't quite know how to mix it together the right way. So, I mean, if it had been a team that was playing that way the whole season, I would have anticipated you guys to probably rate them maybe a little bit higher than in some cases, in two cases, 7th. But
so to that point, I kind of want to ask you, and this maybe is more to Leper as the more experienced of the trio here, more knowledgeable maybe. What does Hivemind Gaming's playoff run look like, given the growth they've had over the season?
So they've got, being that they're the 3rd seed, they are going to be playing the I think it's the winner of the LGC Hyperion game tonight. The winner of that series, Hivemind Gaming versus either LGC or Hyperion, the winner of that series will go on to face Big Duck Entourage.
That looks to be it. And depending upon who wins, right? If Spartans versus Hyperion,
they will play A5, which is the winner of tonight's game.
Gotcha.
So a question I have, and this may be disrupting things a little bit, but I talked with you a little bit, Leper. This is before Swifty got on. I'm sorry, Swifty.
You're fine.
We have conversations without you only sometimes, and they're never as much fun as when you're there. We were talking about when you look at the two divisions, right? Division 1, Division 2, which one would you say was the more competitive division within itself? And how would you measure that? Like, looking at these divisions and the experience.
Really, really hard. So when I look at, like, what I want to see when I answer that question, if I'm looking at something blind, right, is I want to see how close the teams are together, right? Do we have a lot of, like, 4 and 3 teams, right? Do we have, or are we in a position where we have a lot of, like, 5 and 0 teams and 0 and 5 teams? You get what I mean? That's the first thing that I'm looking at.
Is it more top-weighted or distributed?
I weight the middle the most. The larger the middle is, the more competitive the division, is my viewpoint on that.
What's up, Swifty?
Now, are you rating competitiveness strictly, like, about how close in skill those middle-of-the-pack teams are? What happens when you have, say, a team at the top that is so far and beyond, say, a team at the top of the other side?
If the rest of the division, right, the rest of the league is close and is actively competing for placements in there, then it is a competitive league, even though the top spot is not being competed for. Does that make sense?
So, makes sense, yes. I was mainly playing devil's advocate.
That's just my viewpoint on the question, right? Of what I'm looking for in a competitive league. Now, the flip side is if you have a clear division, you have a top section and a bottom section, how often are the people in that section competing for that? You get what I mean?
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Leper, now, though, and I understand that logically. Like, when I'm looking at the standings, the measurement to me tells me that Division 2, Division B, was maybe more competitive in terms of, like, these teams were duking it out for more spots in that midfield. But does your experience firsthand being in that division make you feel like it was a competitive division? Like, was it truly competitive, or was it really just the top two and everyone else.
So it feels like the top two and then everybody else. From my perspective as the number 2 team, right? Having played all these other teams, that's been my perspective. It's like you have Feed the Dream and Good Squad Kappa, and then you have everybody else. And I'll bring this back to actually talking about the standings, right? But I do feel that 3, 4, 5, and 6 were relatively competitive with each other, and it wasn't until maybe week 6, week 7 that we saw Hive Mind Gaming coming out of that pack. You get what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas over in Division A, you basically had, after the first few weeks, you had Revolution, BDE, and then you had TFF and Goon Squad Gaming Delta competing with each other, and then you had LGC and Hyperion competing with each other. There wasn't any real movement between those tiers. So by that argument, I would say that that Division B was the more competitive one.
I have some nuance I'd like to throw in there. Maybe some nuance. I'm not comfortable making a determination because I think both of these divisions have some unique characteristics amongst themselves and compared to each other. But like looking at the game from September 20th, the reschedule with Delta versus Revolution Uprising, right? Delta, team that a year ago couldn't win a game, much less a match. Couldn't win a match, much less a game. Took a game off of Revolution Uprising, right? And, every team drops games here and there, and that's not necessarily a huge deal, but that seems significant to me when you do look at the scoreboard, when you do look at the wins, losses, and points distribution being kind of top-heavy for Division A. It makes me feel like there's some validity to say Division A is significantly competitive when a 4th place team that has a negative win-loss, is down 6 points from first place, is able to take games and be competitive and find a way to challenge. You're talking about one hand challenging Danobi, right? Would we ever see something like that from TD Shadow versus Feed the Dream Black?
We didn't, and that's kind of what I wanted to bring us back to for this, is that to me, looking at the players that they had, TD Shadow is probably the biggest underperformer of this entire season.
Straight up. That's a hot take.
Given the caliber of players that they have on TD Shadow, I did not in any way expect them to be where they're at.
This is the team with Girth Brooks.
This is the team with Girth Brooks, although Girth
the
Brooks
best name in CGG IBS.
Right.
Is it Swifty stamp of approval? Best name ZGG.
It's not like the highest tiered name for reasons that we got into last week, but it's my personal favorite.
All right. It's the ZGG Book Club selection.
It's one of those,
Swifty Book
one of
Club
those
selection.
things, right? Where it's like I look at the team that has Crockpot in the top lane, one of our best top laners from the last split. We've got Rhymes, an incredibly capable jungler. We've got, at the time, one of the most improved players that I've seen in a long time before they ranked out, King of Brawl, right? You have some tremendous names on here, and you had Brandon Needs Help and Zyphus, players that have gone really far in this leagues and other leagues. And it just, something seems to be missing, that they're not coming together as a unit to make this happen. And I was really expecting a lot out of this team and this organization, given that this was the coach that had MIT winning in the finals and took a lot of credit for that. I was expecting a lot more out of TD Shadow, unfortunately.
Do you want to ask? So I have to be getting gone here in the next 2 to 4 minutes because got to go make some dinner for the parents who are visiting. But I do want to talk to you guys real quick. I want to get some understandings. One, looking at LGC versus Hyperion tonight. Mm-hmm. Who do you think is going to take that? So that's question one. Who do you think is going to take that W? Okay. And then, what teams do you think? What 4 teams do you think move on from next week, or what are maybe?
So
let me pull back from that.
Let's move to that slide. Okay.
Okay, go for
Okay.
it. Sorry.
So with my awful cropping that has my mouse on it. Okay. So I say LGC wins time. And it would not surprise me at all for LGC to have a 2-0 here.
A 2-0?
A 2-0. Would not surprise me at all. Hyperion has I'll put it like this. Hyperion might have the edge in terms of like on paper talent in some areas, right? I think the LGC does match up favorably there, but I also look at the LGC Spartans roster has been taking games off of every single team this entire split, and they have stayed together this entire time. And the Hyperion roster has been together for maybe 10 days.
Obviously, I'm far less confident than Leper is. I would still, I think you bring up fair points, right? And I know that even I'm about to counter my own point in saying I don't like roster changes that are frequent. I think when you're dealing with two like lower pack IBS teams, I'm still gonna put my money on the team with the head-to-head matchups being favorable. And for me, I think that's Hyperion.
That's fair. I would also say though that the LGC,
2-1 though.
The LGC Spartans carry, right? Czar Pizza in the top lane, right?
Czar Pizza.
Czar Pizza,
Not Tista.
I think is in my mind is heavily favored in this. I also personally, it really comes down to like I know that LGC has had like issues with one player, finding like one player the past couple weeks. Hyperion has had so many different issues, so many different role swaps that I unfortunately have no faith, right? Like it's I'm looking at a team that's about to play literally their first game together versus a team that overall has been playing together the entire split. Like it's really hard for me to look at the complete rookie team and
Absolutely.
go, yeah, that's gonna win.
Well, for my last question, and it doesn't necessarily be our wrap up, but it needs to be my wrap up.
So
what is? Go ahead.
You were gonna ask what 4 teams make it out.
I was gonna retract that because I feel like we can talk more about that next week,
Yeah.
right? In more detail. I would like to maybe ask, what is your dark horse? What is your team that's coming from the bottom gonna pull the classic C9 gauntlet run? Even though we don't necessarily have gauntlets, obviously, but who's gonna be that dark horse, right? Who's gonna come up from lower seed and compete against top teams? And how far do you think maybe they'll go?
So I haven't totally thought out this, but I'm gonna say this. Just
Scuffcast, get it in there.
Scuffcast. I'm gonna say TFF Solar Flare.
Does that count as low?
I mean, they're in
dark horse.
They're in round 1.
I'd say anything under third place is
they're third place.
worthwhile.
They're third right now.
Yeah, they're
TFF
third place.
Solar. Does that really
That's
count as a
true.
dark horse?
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't see anybody like if you asked me, gun to my head. Which
When you look at the
teams are
top
making
4 in
out,
the league, I think like no one else looks like they can beat them right now. So I will give you that.
Yeah, like if not them, I would say Goon Squad Delta, like that there. But like I think that if TFF Solar Flare proves that they have the answers to defeat Goon Squad Gaming Kappa on October 10th, then they absolutely can go all the way.
I want to put
that's
my energy on Delta, but my take's probably Hive Mind. I think they're my dark horse.
That's my take too. I think, and to me, it feels more like a dark horse because it's a team with a losing record currently, you know. But the team has been scaling, so y'all have said, which is to me looks really good when you're moving into playoffs, especially right before playoffs. And again, maybe I'm biased, but like this is the team that like I got to watch very intricately and cast and like verbalize exactly what was happening as the game was going on. And they look very close to having a recipe for success. And I think with the right practice and the right sort of approach, and if they handle their next scrims well going into playoffs, I think this team could actually do really well.
All
right.
I mean, it's hard because like all 4 of those teams can pull it out, right? Like I think that the 5 and 6 seeds have so many barriers to cross. You know what I mean? That it's a little difficult for me to say one of them is a dark horse.
there's a combined 2 wins across the bottom 4 teams in the entire, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
So any of the 3rd and 4ths, I could see if they get the right recipe and get the right draft, they could go all the way.
Guys, Swifty and Leper, I'm gonna lead us into the closing, the closing statements here. Opportunity for any last thoughts, anything that's exciting to you, anything that's interesting that you want to talk about before we wrap up here and look at and set ourselves up for next week.
So I want to talk a little bit before. Can I co-opt this and instead of that just explain how this works? Because people are confused.
What do you mean?
So
playoff
format. It's going to work like this, right? So we have Division A, which was the division with Revolution and TFF and LGC, and on the Division B is the one with FTD and Hive Mind Gaming and RAR. So in round 1, which is best of 3, we have Division A 3rd seed in TFF Solar Flare, B 3rd seed as Hive Mind Gaming, A 4th seed as Goon Squad Delta, and B 4th seed as TD Shadow. Those are designated as these matches, right? So, for example, if we go down to October 10th and we look at Big Duck Entourage is going to play the winner of the B 3rd seed game, which is TFF Solar Flare versus RAR. Does that make sense?
It's cross-divisional playoffs by seeding.
Yes. So then
Brain doesn't process it very well, and I'm sure there's others out there that could use that input. So thank you, Leopard.
So then when we get down to like October 17th with his division semis, right? The winner of the Revolution versus winner of B game will play the winner of the Goon Squad Gaming Kappa versus A 3rd game. Does that make sense? So whoever wins those 2 games in the center will be the top game on October 17th.
Alrighty. Any questions from the class? Going once. Going twice?
I have a question.
Get down.
I has a question.
Oh my goodness. Yes, Leper, what is your question?
Where do babies come from?
Okay, and with that, folks, we are going to look to wrap up the episode. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leper. Thank you, Swifty. Guys, next week, tune in around the same time, maybe a bit earlier. Hopefully, we'll have Decker joining us.
It'll have to be a bit earlier because you have Swifty and me, and we like to talk.
You guys love to talk. I mean, we all like to talk. We're going to have the full-blown, like, Silver Scrap squad here with us next week, talking about head-to-head matchups. Correct me if I say anything wrong.
For those that have not experienced the Silver Scraps playoffs before, we are going to be doing our playoff debates. Each of us is going to be taking the side of one particular team in their particular match, and we are going to be making the case for why that team is going to win. Every team will be represented.
There may be hot sauce involved.
And there definitely will be hot sauce.
There will be hot sauce. There will be hot sauce. All right, everyone. With that said, it's been a pleasure joining you guys for this a little bit more abbreviated episode of Silver Scraps tonight. Please get out there, have a good night. Good luck to Hyperion and LGC in their rescheduled match tonight. Enjoy yourselves. Make sure to get outside, drink some water, play some League of Legends, but don't get salty. It's okay. Have some fun. Love all of you. Take care.